Hi, welcome to Abacast, and it's a great pleasure today to welcome John Paul Fah to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
Really great to see you here today. I think perhaps we'll kick off with just a little bit about yourself, just so you can introduce yourself to those who are going to be watching this.
Sure.
Just tell us about your youth, what you did when you were younger. What did you get up to?
Well, as a young child, I've lived in Gibraltar all of my life. I've thoroughly enjoyed that part of my childhood. Then I went to study at university, like most of us do here in Gibraltar. I went to Sheffield University, where I read law with Spanish, and very cheekily, I managed to get an Erasmus year in Granada University.
Excellent.
Where I learned to snowboard. The first thing I did with my grant money was went and bought a season pass for the year,
right.
and I bought myself a snowboard.
Right. Presumably you went to the Alhambra as well, no?
I did, yes.
Okay.
I did some
We'll forgive you the prioritising the snowboarding. And did you do anything else on the legal front after you did your degree? I mean, did you go to the bar? Were you called?
Yes, I did the bar in London, what was City Law School at the time.
Right.
And then from there, I got an offer to work at Hassan's in Gibraltar with Vikram Nagrani.
Right.
And so I was working in the corporate and commercial department there for about 5 years.
Okay.
And we worked on what was the largest merger within the gaming industry at the time, when Bwin Party, it produced Bwin Party, it was Bwin and Party Gaming.
Right.
And then I joined their legal team, working with James Elliott, before making the move over to government.
Right, okay. That's an interesting departure, really, because a lot of people would move I suppose, the other direction, potentially, into kind of private practice after a stint in a government role. What made you decide to kind of go in that direction? Why did you choose to go into government?
At the time, it was a combination of things. I just had a young, I was embarking on my family and having a young family, and I also, the opportunity that arose within government was to work with Neil Costa, who had a very diverse portfolio, and I had heard was a workaholic. So I wasn't really seeing it as moving from the private sector to the public sector. I was seeing it moving into the public sector at a private sector work rate. And lo and behold, that's really kept pace.
Right, okay. You lead the OFT.
Yes.
For everyone's clarity, the Office of Fair Trading.
Yeah.
What would you say that your kind of younger experiences, your childhood experiences, how did that shape your leadership role today? I mean, what do you think drew you into that opportunity of being a leader?
I think it's leading, but within a very business-facing environment. And I'm grateful that my parents had a small business when I was growing up, and it's a business that we lived and breathed as a family. It was a small kiosk at Eastern Beach. Right. And I have very fond memories of it, because we'd wake up very early on a Saturday morning, or actually all days of the week, and we'd help set up. So we would stock the fridges the night before, and then sort of remove we had sort of gates outside the windows, and we learned to take those down. And then during the peak times, wherever I was running around on Eastern Beach, I knew that we'd have to go back just after lunchtime, and we'd have to sell sweets and sell ice creams, and it learned to deal with money. It also learned how to deal with a business, and I've always seen my parents working extremely hard, and that's something that sort of it's translated over to me, and I feel like I do too.
Right. As someone who goes to the beach very, very rarely, and only because my grandchildren are there, I regard that kind of kiosk as an essential service, isn't it? 'Cause
absolutely,
you kind of get your grandkids up there and just start pumping them full of ice cream and stuff, which is great. When you look at your career and the trajectory you've had, what would you say is your biggest achievement to date? I mean, where do you? You're still a very young guy, so where are you ranking your experiences?
The most fulfilling part of my career has got to be when we got together and dealt with the business community during the pandemic, which was called BEAT. And it was a number of government departments there coming together and implementing the government's policy on assisting businesses that we forced to close down. And those were all sizes of businesses, but really they're businesses that wouldn't have been able to pay their employees. And you have your business here, I guess a lot of your employees are like family. And how much would it pain you if you were helpless to not have the revenue to be able to pay them the money that they deserve to be able to put food on the table? So we stepped into that position, we acted very, very quickly, and we were able to work together with the Department of Employment, the Income Tax Office, and various other government departments to get essential payments out. So that was very rewarding to see how quickly we mobilized and got that done.
Yeah, I mean, it was thankfully an exceptional time.
Yeah.
And I say thankfully in the sense that we don't want to repeat that, obviously. But it was also a time when things became very redefined, isn't it? I mean, just the idea now of having a working from home model for so many staff. I mean, I don't know if that's something you guys do in the government service, but what sort of size of team do you lead?
So we've got 18 people within the department, and they're broadly split into 4 different sections. So in a very quick nutshell, it's consumer protection, business licensing and registration. Then we've got anti-money laundering or AML regulation of real estate agents and high-value dealers. And then we've got like a general business function.
Okay. Interesting. I mean, I know, I confess, I know very little about what you guys would do. Could you tell us just a little bit more about the nitty-gritty of kind of what it means to go into work every day, and what does your working day look like?
Sure. So the working day it's split between the firefighting, which I think all of us have an element of, and then also I meet frequently with the team leaders across each of the sections just to see if there's anything that I can help them with. So both on licensing and registration to see if we've got any tricky applications that require my attention, but I like to keep hold of on track of what each of the different sections are doing. I also meet regularly with the Minister for Business, Minister Arias Vasquez, whose vision for business I share, and we have a strategic sort of policies that we're pursuing and we're putting into place.
What do you think is the most challenging part of what you do?
The most challenging part, I think, has got to be working within a small jurisdiction like Gibraltar, where you've got to move very quickly from one aspect of your work to another, and deliver to the expectation or to a certain service level that you'd find maybe other smaller towns in other countries couldn't deliver to. But here, because we are an independent jurisdiction, then we've got to meet the entire service requirements.
Yeah. It's perhaps a question that's going to beg an obvious answer, but how do you find dealing with businesses locally generally? And I suppose that's a very broad question, isn't it? Because they'd be so diverse that it's impossible to have a properly scaled question in such a brief time. But just if you can give us just a general overview of how your interplay with businesses locally looks like, and so how you gauge that.
From my perspective, I want to have the least interaction necessary with business, because that means that they're spending more time on their business and less time with us. So if they need our help, we're there. But in terms of registration and licensing and renewal, we want that to be as seamless as possible. So I want to be able to give them all of the information that they need on original registration and application. I want them to be able to come in, do that process as quickly as possible, and get to their business, and then focus as much time as they can on that.
Yeah, I mean, that's very refreshing to hear. I mean, for someone who'd be loosely described as a bureaucrat or a technocrat, it's great to hear that kind of positivity and kind of refreshing attitude to making business flow as easily as possible, and as well as possible. We did talk prior to today about the treaty and whether that was something we'd like to get into. And personally, I wouldn't want to get into the nitty-gritty of the treaty because, first of all, I haven't really looked at it in any great detail. But I think it would be helpful to get your perspective on what sort of opportunities you think would come our way when that border becomes more free-flowing. Having said that, it's been a fairly free-flowing border for a while now, at least in my experience, although I do cross at very early times most of the time. But when it does become, hopefully, even more free-flowing, what sort of opportunities do you think that presents for us as a community and also for the business sector?
I think in terms of a community and sort of the business landscape at large, the biggest opportunity arises from that investor confidence. If you look at the last 300 years or 300 plus years, Gibraltar's economy has continued to grow, particularly in the last few decades. And we've done that against the backdrop of no treaty and the relationship with our neighbor that's been what it's been. The fact that we now have a treaty and it's backed by the EU, I think will give a lot of investors so much more confidence to do business in Gibraltar, which we were already seeing being done. So I just think that it has the potential to turbocharge our economy. I really see that.
Yes, and I suppose as well the fact that hopefully over time the communities on both sides of the old border would become not so much more integrated, but just more at ease with each other. I suppose that would be the hope. Then that too should lend, I think, a positive dynamic to business flow anyway, as people become more comfortable with the new regime that will be in place in respect of the cross-border flow. And in respect of the, I suppose, what we'd call the sort of the high street, main street, I mean, do you see any kind of opportunities or threats? I mean, what's your SWOT on the high street?
Well, the high street is already seeing some of that investment at change. I think we only have to look at this building now to see an international coffee brand that's opening up its second unit in Gibraltar. And I think that, and it's not the only one we're seeing. I think we're very quick often in Gibraltar to point out the negative, and you'll say, oh, there are 5 shops that have closed down. There may have been 5 shops that have closed down. There may have been 10 that have opened, but we highlight the 5 that have closed. So where I'm standing from, I think we've seen new investments onto the high street. I think there are some retailers that may have to reconfigure some parts of the business, and that's inevitable, and we're there to help them as much as we can in that space. But I think there's also other retailers who are looking around and saying, how can I take advantage of that treaty, and is that going to mean an increased foot flow onto our main street, and how can I take advantage of that and reposition myself to maximize my opportunities under the treaty?
I guess the contra is beyond your scope or beyond your vision, but I'm going to ask you the question anyway. I mean, how do you see us impacting the other side of the border right now? I mean, do the outflow of capital, the investment going the other way? I mean, do you have a take on that, or?
I think my take on that is that whereas previously we may have had a lot of Gibraltarians spending a lot of time in Spain, when the tax treaty was brought into play, that brought a lot of Gibraltarians back to Gibraltar. So I think that will have already happened at that juncture more than what it may happen with a treaty. It may facilitate people like me that enjoy playing paddle, going over and playing a little bit more. And I hope my wife isn't listening. But generally, I think what we're going to see is more people coming from sort of the Campo region and beyond to Gibraltar, rather than a flow out from Gibraltar to the Campo.
Well, I just wonder if there will be any kind of investment from Gibraltar into the local, into the hinterland, because I think that's potentially an opportunity as well. But I'm not quite sure how that would be, other than in real estate and obvious mechanisms like that. But
I think we've already had examples of those, both in real estate in Arcadesa and in the marina here.
Yeah. Now, coming back to the specific remit that you have in terms of the overview of business and its connection to the treaty, what would you say to someone who is thinking about launching a business today in Gib under this new environment? Do you have any kind of inspirational words for someone?
I think the time is now. The time is now. Like Gibraltar has a lot of key ingredients that really work for a lot of different types of businesses, from sort of the fiscal advantages, the tax advantages to setting up in Gibraltar, right down to the talent pool. It's very easily overlooked, but we have an incredibly educated workforce because of the generous grant scheme that everyone that goes through education here is entitled to then go and undertake undergraduate studies and beyond in the UK. It means that we have a talent pool here that is bilingual, that is well educated, that you can tap into. And then of course anyone relocating an existing business may decide that the lifestyle advantages and so the safety and security and the education in Gibraltar, all factors that lead them to saying, I pick Gibraltar over a lot of the other destinations that are more commonly thought of, but don't have all of those key ingredients that I see us as having. So I think we're one of the best places in the world to set up a business. I really do.
Yeah. I suppose this is a little bit of a rehash of the same question, but in your view, what sectors of the business environment stand to gain most from the treaty? We said before we started that, at least I said before we started, that financial services doesn't really come into play under the treaty, other than, as you said, the AML alignment with EU requirements and the like. But in terms of the other kind of broad business sectors in Gibraltar,
I'd just like to take you back to financial services. I think that they would stand to gain to the extent that they can now provide their employees with full certainty that that is going to be a very fluid border. And whilst I take your earlier point that it has been fluid for some time, we now have that guaranteed under the treaty, and that is incredibly valuable. So I see that financial services do have that sort of advantage that they can now use to grow. And I think we've seen some of the larger operators now refurbishing big office space in Gibraltar. And I can see that we'll see newer and big names also coming and joining them here.
Yeah. I get a very clear sense from you that you have a degree of reasonably based optimism, not just about the treaty, but just the business environment in general. You've clearly got a very strong sense of our place in the world and the kind of benefits that Gibraltar can add to an entrepreneur who's thinking about coming here. If I can now take you, I think you said you had like there are four blocks in your purview, and one of them would be the complaints department, but it would be the consumer protection area. Just going in that direction a little bit away from the sanguine kind of optimistic view of things. What sort of area in Gibraltar do you think, do you find that you get the most complaints about, or that people find most frustrating in the business world in Gib? Is that a fair question?
It's a fair question. You're putting me slightly on the spot because we release an annual report that I've got to prepare within the next few weeks for this year. And had I done my homework, I should have looked at those complaints. So I'll just have to take in on sort of general knowledge from the last few meetings that we've had. But one that stands out is sort of a retail sort of interaction where someone buys a good, they're not satisfied with the product or the service, and then they come to us and the team intervene with a retailer. But I've also got to say those retailers are very receptive and very helpful and very keen to resolve those complaints, because a lot of them rely on sort of that word of mouth. So one of the parts that I really dislike seeing is when a consumer calls out a business on social media, and that has a really negative impact on the business because it's sort of a one voice that is then heard by so many. And maybe they haven't approached that business to try and resolve the complaint, or they haven't come to us for us to try and approach the business and resolve it. So we find that when they do come to us, we always ask, have you asked the business first? Have you presented your complaint to them? And sometimes that alone resolves the issue. And when it doesn't, then we have an excellent team of people with a great rapport within the business community that do go out there, talk to businesses and try and resolve it so everyone's happy.
Again, forgive my ignorance, but what sort of statutory powers do you have to kind of go to a retailer and say, you've got to deliver this? I mean, is that something
we could?
Is it just purely cooperative?
We could, so we can issue different types of sanctioning power and orders under Fair Trading Act, but it's something that we don't really, that is sort of the last port of call for us, and we try and use sort of softer persuasion before we get to that, and it's very rare that we do have to resort to issuing those types of orders.
Yeah. I mean, of course, sledgehammer to crack a nut. Somebody buys a hairdryer, with all due respect, you're not going to start exercising statutory powers to get a refund on that or whatever. That's interesting. I think the whole social media backdrop as well must be a major part of your, I wouldn't say your worry scale, but it must surely impact the way that your department conducts itself, because it's such an influential dynamic in today's business world, isn't it?
It is, and we monitor it. So when we see that there are businesses advertising on social media and they're not licensed, they're not registered, then we have different team members who will take that up.
One thing I'd never thought about, but that did strike me as we were going through the questions for this, was the notion of fairness, that you're called the Office of Fair Trading.
Yeah.
And that, I suppose, applies as much to the retailer as it does to the consumer. So
Correct.
I think, if I'm right, you've got a kind of a balancing act there, haven't you, between both?
Absolutely.
And you've already spoken about the kind of support you can give the consumer, but what kind of support would you give the retailer?
What we always try and do when we're dealing with retailers or businesses is to put ourselves in their shoes and try and see what's reasonable, and then also assess if there is a consumer harm. And more often than not, by doing that, we can see the two sides of any dispute that you may have. And that always allows us to make some progress. Yeah.
Okay.
But I just add to that, we've talked about the OFT. The OFT has and has historically had those defined functions of business licensing and consumer protection. And the department is wider than that. It's the Department of Business. And within the Department of Business, we've also got business registration that falls sort of squarely outside the OFT. And then that sort of general business support and development function, like you saw with the Gib London event that we hosted in October last year, and we'll plan to host again this year. And we've also got a startup hub. We facilitate the enterprise scheme, that are startup loans for new businesses. So I almost see as these different business functions have been bolted on to the OFT, and now the OFT is becoming this wider umbrella of the Department of Business. And the latest bolt-on or extension to that is us becoming the market surveillance authority under the treaty.
I've spoken in previous podcasts with others about the kind of constraints that we are up against as a business, and one of the major ones is recruitment, and just tapping into local potential, tapping into locally returning graduates. And I'm guessing that kind of educational side is specifically outside your purview, but to the extent that your kind of main goal would be to promote business and to enhance it, does that element come into your strategic thinking, at least, if not directly into your day-to-day work?
It has, but I guess at a very basic level compared to the efforts that others are making. So, for example, we've waived fees for business license applications for people who are 21 and under. We engage and collaborate with a young enterprise scheme. In fact, we've got a presentation that we're delivering to them later this month. So we are active and we do assist them, but I know that there are other ministries that are putting on careers fairs and sort of very targeting that sector, and I think that over time will have a significant positive impact.
Yeah, I mean, we have spoken to Minister Feetham about that and what he was up to, or has been up to in that regard. We ourselves have started our own little student hub downstairs in the bowels of the building, and that's proving to start to have some traction as well. But I think, particularly kind of from my vantage point of someone who's in my mid-60s, looking back now, thank you. Looking back now, I think we could potentially all have done more in this regard, because I think we're not the only business that struggles to find and tap into local talent, and attracting them to come back and stay and think about a long-term career, particularly within the financial services sector, and particularly within our own segment of it. It is difficult. It is very challenging, and I just encourage you guys to do as much as you can to bring these guys back and make them feel that this is something they want to do.
So one of the pieces that we put in play for the Gib London event, and it was started by Albert Isola, was to create a network of the Gibraltarians that are working abroad, and in particular in London, which there are over 100. And so what we've done is, when we've put on events, we've invited these individuals, and we've almost seen them as semi-ambassadors of Gibraltar, because they're often asked about Gibraltar affairs, and we think it's important to keep them up to date on that. But a lot of these individuals also have plans to eventually return to Gibraltar. So if they've got that network and they're connected in to these Gibraltar businesses, you may find that you have a pensions expert or a funds expert that's already working in London, is familiar to Gibraltar, and that would be a far safer hire than someone who has no connection to Gibraltar whatsoever.
Yes, yes, indeed. You've spoken about having a strategic outlook, at least, with Minister Vasquez, Aris Vasquez, and that's very encouraging. I love it when people talk strategy, but of course, as Peter Drucker once said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. From your perspective of where you sit now in terms of the kind of culture that you oversee at the OFT, and trying to be strategic about what you do, perhaps we can wrap up this very interesting discussion with your view. What's your vision going forward for the OFT? Where do you in the political hierarchy see your role going forward? And what's the most exciting thing you're looking forward to?
So for us, the top priority is to make business easier, to facilitate that business interaction with government. And the way we introduce that culturally is by working as hard as possible as we can to achieve that aim, and also involving all of the different sections of the department. So we have town hall meetings with all of the staff members every 2 weeks, and we relay that message. And then we are digitizing forms, we're consolidating them, we are improving our back-end processes, we're digitizing those too. We're adopting AI, we're showing the different teams how we are building those AI models, both by uploading our knowledge and then narrowing those instructions down, perfecting them. We're showing them how we're doing all of that. So when you involve the whole department in that process and you show them that culture, then they're onboarded onto that journey. So when they pick up the phone or they're answering an email, they've got that background, they've got that feeling of momentum to say, okay, we're part of this change that's making it easier for business. And I think that's how we achieve both the cultural sort of update or refresh, but also that strategic priority of making business easier.
John Paul, it's been a real pleasure to talk to you, because you've given me an insight into a part of the business universe that I wasn't particularly aware of. Your enthusiasm and your energy comes through in everything you say, and it's been really encouraging to have you on board. I really wish you well, and I hope that the months ahead, with all the challenges that it's going to present for you and your team, are really successful for you.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you also for putting on the Abacast podcast, because I think it's important that we have these representations and views into our business community. So Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Pleasure.
Pleasure.